is Spectrum.
Alternative medicine, homeopathy, secrets, society, hypnosis, the paranormal, alternative energy, UFO, abduction, the weird, the wild, and the wonderful.
With your hosts, Tom Theophanis and Scott Jordan.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to Spectrum Radio Network on BBS Radio 2. I'm Scott Jordan here with my co-host, Tom Theophanis. And remember, there's no such thing as too much information. Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, buddy.
Good.
What do we got? What do we got this week?
Our guest tonight is Frank Znidarsic, who graduated from the University of Pittsburgh with a BS in electrical engineering in 1975. He's currently a registered professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania. In the 1980s, he went on to obtain an AS in Business Administration at St. Francis College. He studied physics in the University of Indiana in the 90s, and Frank has been employed as an engineer in the steel, mining, and utility industries. Frank has been investigating new sources of energy for 20 years. His papers have been published in numerous places, including Infinite Energy Magazine and the Journal of New Energy. Welcome, Frank.
Scott and Tom, it's a pleasure to be on your show, and I have some interesting things to tell you.
Oh,
that's
good.
Great. That's great.
Glad to have you. Hey, Frank, how you doing? I want to ask you a question about the history of cold fusion and where it started from, where it went to, and did it ever really die, or did it just die in the mainstream?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. There was reports of cold fusion in the 1920s, but they were never really followed through with. A big discovery was made by Pons and Fleischmann, and they got a palladium electrode, and they put in heavy water, deuterium, and they got, through this electrolysis process, they got a lot of anomalous energy. But it worked some of the time, and other times it didn't work, and it was very sensitive to small impurities in the palladium, poisons that may affect the palladium, the grain structure of the palladium, the loading density of the heavy water into the palladium structure, and they had trouble with replication. And so the replications, a lot of them didn't work because they didn't follow the protocol. The second big thing that happened is it did not fit into the existing theoretical paradigm. Ordinarily, fusion happens when two nucleons come together and bump into each other. And when they come together, they have to overcome their electrostatic repulsion. And that takes energies of the order of 4 times the interior of the sun. The surface of the sun is not hot enough for fusion. And to think that fusion is happening on the tabletop at low energies is quite impossible. And so based on these theoretical constructs that many feel are well understood, it was rejected. And from that point, it sort of fell into disfavor, and Pons and Fleischmann really got a really great thing going, actually ended their careers in disgrace.
Right. So you think that their experiment in and of itself was a success?
Yes, some of the experiments were a success. One of the experiments actually melded the palladium, but they didn't understand the theory of it. They didn't understand exactly what they were doing. They were sort of shooting in the dark. So sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And in science, we'd like to have 100% reproducibility. And this is an extraordinary claim that they were getting fusion reactions at room temperature. So it requires extraordinary proof, and they could not provide it.
Right. Okay. So some people came along later and discredited them. What do you think that was a malicious act, or was it just mainly the scientific community that couldn't reproduce it, so therefore it fell by the wayside?
Well, a lot of inventors have been producing perpetual motion machines since the 1700s, and these things generally don't work. They violate things called the principle of increasing of entropy and conservation of momentum. And so the patent office right now rejects all claims that appear to be perpetual motion. And so Pons and Fleischmann's invention appeared to fit into this fringe aspect of scientific discovery. But that's not exactly true. Pons and Fleischmann were one of the world's leading electrochemists. And when they said they had something, we should have believed it, but we didn't.
Right. So we should have paid more attention to what they were doing and then carried on with it and made any sort of changes that needed to be made through experimentation to come out with a working model. So what happened from there? From that point on, I'm sure there's more history.
Oh, yeah, that's when I started to get involved. I wasn't involved with Pons and Fleischmann, but a guy named James Patterson produced an energy cell called, through his company, Clean Energy Technologies. And I actually went out to see Patterson at PowerGen 95. That's where he had a public expose. And his machine was working, producing about 1 kilowatt of energy at that time. He got a patent through because he's an older fella, and they gave special considerations for someone that's older because they don't have 20 years to wait to get their patent. The
Right.
device was sent to the University of Illinois, and Professor George Miley, who's a good friend of mine now, actually replicated the results, and he also discovered the excess energy. And I've met with Miley, and he invited me to come out to the University of Illinois where I spoke on the subject. Now, what Miley found, which was even more amazing, was the transmutation of heavy elements. He found that elements in the middle of the periodic table, like copper, zinc, and tin, they were transmuting. And the energies required to transmute these elements, according to conventional theories, aren't found in the interior of the sun. They're only found in a supernova explosion. And so when he reported transmutation of heavy elements, the story became even more unbelievable to the mainstream establishment, and they rejected these claims out of hand.
Okay. Now, was that a correct thing to do? Were they correct in rejecting it?
Well, science is an empirical subject. It's not like a religion where you go back to the original book to find the ultimate truth. You do an experiment, and it produces a result, and you have to, build your science based on these observable results. And throughout history, observable results have changed things. For instance, Aristotle believed in many things like the continuum of nature. Newton came along, and he did experimental results with motion and resulted in Newton's laws of motion. And he got to this because the thing that they had was a telescope, so they can look how the planets move. That's how he developed his laws. And then in the 1900s, they thought that all of physics was solved and complete, but then they started getting these spectral emissions and quantum jumps in atoms. Niels Bohr started to discover that, and that was a new paradigm. And these experimental conditions did not fit within the existing structure, and so the structure had to be changed. But now we feel that we know enough that the structure is well established on solid foundation, and these cold fusion results don't fit in there. And once again, I think what we're going to see is a paradigm change. Now we have new observable results beyond those of the atomic spectrum that are going to change not only the way that we live and the way we produce energy, but the way that physics is taught in future books.
Right. But one of the problems is, or one of the reoccurring themes, let's say, is whenever the paradigm shift happen, there's large groups of current scientists that have problems rewiring their brain to accept those paradigm shifts, and rejection and denial and all of these incredible human traits pop out, and they'll deny it to until they make their own paradigm shift and go, okay, well, I guess it's right. That's a human element that we have to deal with, right?
Yes, chief among these is Dr. Robert Parks. He's the head of the American Physical Society, and he publishes his weekly newspaper called What's New, and he's been bashing cold fusion from day one. And he got together with Peter Zimmerman from the State Department, and they ruined careers. University professors and other people who wanted to do honest scientific exploration and to see if this cold fusion exists. They actually cut their funding. The people were disgraced. Papers were not allowed to be published. The whole field was held back because they felt it didn't fit within their theoretical construct. And so it must be something that is ridiculous in their mind. And they really held back the field for 20 years. And I felt they've done irreversible damage to our environment because we should have had new energy 20 years ago. irreversible damage to our economy. A lot of people are homeless, falling off the bottom of the ladder, and the cost of energy is one thing that's pushing our standard of living down. And I hope that when this all shakes out, the people that held us back, it will be known in the mainstream media.
Well, we're sorry, but we got to take a quick break right now, and we'll see you guys on the other side.
Are you suffering from constant pain in the knee, shoulder, wrist, and other parts of your body? Needle-free acupuncture with Lipingo Life Pads may be the answer. Lipingo Life Pads combine ancient wisdom with modern nanotechnology and advanced engineering. They're designed to relieve pain naturally with no needles and no side effects. That's Lepingo, LipingoProducts.com.
If you suffer or know someone that suffers from back pain, knee pain, or any other chronic or sports-related pains, you need to visit LipingoProducts.com. Dealing with pain can affect every aspect of your life, which is why our products are designed to bring you real relief. Our products are not only easy to use, effective, and safe for the entire family, but our prices are competitive and offer a complete satisfaction guarantee. Visit LipingoProducts.com. Real life solutions for pain-free living.
So Frank, tell me more about the Patterson Power Cell.
Well, when I went to see the Patterson Power Cell in Anaheim, I was truly amazed by it, and I wished I could have been either senior James Patterson or the junior Jim Patterson, because I thought they had the world in front of them. They felt the same thing. Motorola actually offered them $60 million for their equipment, but they turned it down because they felt they could make more money. Well, what happened with their devices is similar to what happened in many cold fusion devices. They didn't quite understand the technology. And they made additional batches of beads, and they didn't quite work out. And James, the elder James, was working on it, and he's since deceased. And young Jim, to my dismay, had a brain aneurysm. He died. So the Patterson technology had some problems with reproducibility that they weren't aware of initially, and the people that started it came to an unnatural end. And this was really a good story, and I thought it was the beginning of cold fusion, but it was just one step along the way.
But has anybody taken over their work?
Nobody's really done it. There's a group of papers and other information that a friend of mine has that he's working with the Patterson family. I understand the widow Patterson's trying to hold some of this stuff back. There's been a lot of people that invested in the technology at various phases, and they also claim ownership to the technology. So it's I don't know exactly what's going on, but the Patterson Power Cell technology didn't catch on and never reached commercial development.
So did they ever have a working model?
Yes, they did. When I went out to PowerGen 95, that was in Anaheim, California, I witnessed a cold fusion cell with about a milliwatt of electrolysis energy, producing 1 kilowatt of electrical energy. And that was with their good beads. And the device producing 1,000 watts, I thought was quite a breakthrough. And I felt that was the moment that the world changed. So did they, but nobody realized that there was some small element in these beads, maybe an impurity, maybe grain size, thickness that had to be just right in order to get the device to work. And there's been some variables that emerged later on. It could be with where they bought the palladium that affected it. And these problems have never been solved.
That's very interesting.
And has something was learned from their work?
Oh yes, I learned a great deal. One of the things that I observed was the grain size was about 50 nanometers. And I saw that again and again. I saw that in the experiments with Errata, who used 50 nanometer palladium black. Les Case is another experimenter who used nanometer-sized grains. I also noticed that when Patterson got his cell working, he had to use a preheater. And the preheater puts a little bit of heat in it, and it's low-grade thermal energy. It should have nothing to do with nuclear reactions. But I multiplied the thermal frequency, which is 10 to the 14 hertz, times the diameter of the grain size, 50 nanometers, and I got a velocity of 1 million meters per second. And I said, that velocity is important, but I didn't know what it was at that time. But I felt I'd stumbled upon something there with the preheater and the grain size, but I wasn't sure of the ramifications at that time.
Right. Okay, well, let's go a little bit into the future. From Patterson, where would we go next from Patterson?
Where I went next was to NASA Marshall. A guy named Evgeny Podkletnov had spun a superconducting disk, and he got a gravitational anomaly at the University of Tampere. And a guy came in smoking a pipe, and the smoke rose above the superconducting disk.
Ah, yes, I know about that. Carry on.
And then he went up to the floor above. They thought maybe it was a thermal gradient, and they blew smoke, and they saw that this effect went right through the floor. And so after I went down to Anaheim to visit with Patterson, I drove up to NASA Marshall, and a guy named Whit Brantley, he's the head of the Advanced Concepts Office, invited me to come in and look at their Podkletnov replication experiments. And what I found out was the disk size was about a third of a meter, and Podkletnov suggested stimulating it at 3 megahertz. And so 1/3 of a meter times 3 megahertz is 1 million meters per second. So the same velocity that I saw in the cold fusion experiment then emerged in the anti-gravity experiment. I still didn't know what it was, but I felt that this was something significant.
Right. So you're connecting the dots at that point. Great.
Yes, I'm connecting the dots now. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. And there was something going on in both of these experiments. Now, the NASA Marshall team, Robert Parks, got on them big time, and they had $500,000 in funding, and it was cut. Also, there was a woman, Ning Li, who had her own theory, and she didn't want to spin the disk or apply the radio frequency energy. So the Podkletnov experiment, the fundings were cut for it, and it was never fully replicated at NASA.
So that's a little odd, don't you think? It had a result. It showed a result that was scientifically interesting, and you could get something from that. You would think that they would go and throw another $1 million on it at that point, don't you, Frank?
Well, I hope they would have, because it's important that we get off this planet into the stars, and this is one technology that would enable that. The problem is the gravitational force is very weak, 10 to the 39th power weaker than the electromagnetic. And to get a strong gravitational anomaly from a spinning superconductive disk was scientific heresy, so it didn't fit into existing theoretical constructs. But this line of work has been continued at the European Space Agency. They appear to be a little open-minded. And a guy named Martin Timor, who I met last year in Washington, has also detected gravitational anomalies coming from spinning superconductors. These anomalies are very small. They also put a spacecraft in orbit called the Gravity Probe B that was supposed to detect gravitational anomalies from the Earth, and all the gyroscopes tended to line up. They were superconductive gyroscopes, and they found they're interacting through some kind of large gravitational anomaly, like the thing saw by Podkletnov. So that there's interesting things that have just emerged under the surface, but nobody has really connected the dots. But I think we're very close to having a breakthrough on these fields.
Great. Tom, do you have a question?
Well, I wanted to expand more on those findings and on the anti-gravity. What is the future for that?
Well, I think the future is great for the anti-gravity, and I think the future is great for the cold fusion. Now, what I think is these are not separate events. This is one new underlying phenomenon. And what happens, if I can explain a little bit about a magnet, is as a magnetic force is not conserved. If you turn a magnet on, the magnetic field emerges. When you turn it off, it disappears. Now, we can amplify these magnetic effects by putting soft iron into the magnet. And that's what Nikola Tesla did when he made a transformer. He put soft iron in the magnet. That's what Siemens did when he made an alternator. He put soft iron in the magnet. Edison also put soft iron in the generator. So we know how to amplify the electromagnetic force, the magnetic component. But all the fields have magnetic components. The gravitational field has a gravitomagnetic component, and the nuclear force has a magnetic component called the nuclear spin orbit force. And I think we've now discovered the material that can amplify the magnetic components of these forces. And that means that we'll be able to control all the natural forces. So what's emerging is a new understanding, not just of cold fusion and gravitomagnetism, but how to control each of the natural forces in the way that we currently controlled electromagnetism. I believe we're on the verge of a very significant technical revolution.
And how does that apply to, that anti-gravity, if that was to become a reality, how will that apply to our understanding of the speed of light?
I don't think it would affect the understanding of the speed of light, but it would enable us to produce a strong gravitomagnetic field that we could use for propulsion. Also, it would enable us to produce a strong nuclear spin orbit magnetic field for energy production. So we're learning how to control magnetism, which is a non-conserved property of the universe, control the magnetism of the other forces. Now remember when I told you about two nucleons coming together, they have to be banged together with sufficient energy? Right. That's just to overcome the original Coulombic, the electrostatic force. But there's another force in the nuclear environment. It's a magnetic component. It's not of electromagnetic origin, it's of nuclear origin. When you move the nuclear field, you get a nuclear magnetic component. And this component is generally ignored except in considering stability of atoms. It was never considered to be mutable. But now we're finding out that that force is mutable, and we increase the strength of it. We can get nuclear reactions through the Coulombic potential well and produce nuclear reactions by an unconventional manner.
Okay, but is it possible, based on this type of ideas now, that the speed of light could be achieved or greater than?
Well, I don't know if we could go faster than the speed of light. I sort of doubt it. But when you have a gravitomagnetic field induced, obviously gravity affects inertia. They're tied together. And so can we change the inertial frame of a traveling body through a gravitomagnetic field? I don't know that. The only thing I'm studying is can we produce this gravitomagnetic field? But once we have it, we have a strong local gravitational field that's 10 to the 39th power stronger than we expect. We may be able to explore inertia modification. And I don't have any idea where this goes. Just like the original works in electromagnetism could not predict the emergence of a modern computer, learning to control each of the natural forces, I don't know where this is going to wind up. But I'm sure it's going to go into many new marvelous technologies.
Well, that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Where do we go? Where do we go from there? Where are we at present day now in your story?
Yeah, we're present day, and you might want to ask me about Andrea Rossi.
Oh, good, Andrea Rossi. I would like to know about Andrea Rossi. There's some stuff going on in Greece right now that you're aware of. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, cold fusion has been a field that's been very fickle. It produces small amounts of energy. The Navy produced some, Navy SPAWAR produced some, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And the thing that works some of the time produces small amounts of energy. There's always some doubt. Is your instrument off? Is it out of calibration? Did we have a chemical reaction with something burning in there? And so it was never quite believed. And it never quite made it to commercial realization. Even Patterson had his device, it worked, but it didn't work. He didn't know quite why. But this fellow named Andrea Rossi in Italy was fooling around with nickel electrodes, and he was putting carbon dioxide and hydrogen in there, trying to make synthetic fuels through catalytic interaction. And he got a large energy gain. And now we found cold fusion with ordinary hydrogen, not heavy hydrogen, and a very inexpensive metal, not palladium, but nickel. And Rossi's device has produced 15 kilowatts of energy with only a little bit of energy going in, maybe 100 watts that he uses to control this device. And I'm very optimistic about his device because it fits in within the paradigm that I'm thinking of. He has the nanometer structures, which are about 50 nanometers in size, and he's stimulating them thermally. So this velocity that I observed in the cold fusion and the gravitational experiments is also apparent in Rossi's device. So it's consistent with what has happened in the past, but this time it's commercial.
Okay.
And that's happening right now in Greece. Is there a big unveiling happening right now, or is there some hoops that they got to jump through? And
well, there's always hoops, but there was recently a big unveiling where Rossi presented his experiment at the University of Bologna in Italy, and that's a very, very large university. And it was reviewed by scientists. One of the guys is Sinelli. He's a well-known cold fusion researcher. Another guy was Focardi, I believe his name is, and Levi. And these guys have made news releases that are running now in Italy, Greece, throughout Europe. However, we don't hear much about it in the United States. And I'm hoping that we start to hear about this in the mainstream news here.
so you're saying that although this is a big, huge event in your eyes, that we're not hearing about it in North America. It's silence dead over here.
Not only is it science, not only is it dead over here, North America is holding it back. They will not grant Rossi a patent. And he needs a patent in order to protect his rights. He come up with an invention, he deserves to make some money. And he can't put that invention out there without any patent protection. And our patent office has classified his device as perpetual motion and will not give him a patent. So in this very moment when we need an energy breakthrough, when we're reaching an oil peak, we're having uprest in the Middle East, we're having economic crisis, the patent office has stopped him. And I wish this wouldn't happen.
Right. So would this unit be a one-time? Let's take it into the household. Let's say that it gets to a point, maybe 10 years from now, where these units are available for household use. Would this be a one-time purchase? You buy it, you put it in your basement, it powers your area. Or is there a way that they're going to put a meter on this bad boy?
Well, that's a question, because if it's nuclear, the Nuclear Regulatory Agency will put the kibosh on it. But at the same time, when they put the kibosh on it for being nuclear, the patent office will put the kibosh on by saying it doesn't work at all. So if it doesn't work at all, it can't be nuclear. But it is working, and it's produced very little, if no, nuclear products. But until they really can confirm that there's no radiation coming off of this, even in small amounts, it'll probably remain in an industrial environment.
Right.
It'll take a while to work out the bugs. It's a high-pressure device. It could explode. One of the devices ran away. It was supposed to produce 15 kilowatts, jumped up to 130 kilowatts. So there's a lot of issues before we put it into a home environment where the homeowner isn't familiar with technology.
Okay.
It's already been in Greece now, and it heated a factory now, I understand, for 1 year. So it has worked.
It has worked. Yeah, I guess my point is where is it going to fall? Is it going to fall within the realm of the J.P. Morgans saying to Tesla, if I can't put a meter on it, it ain't going to happen? Or is it going to fall into the realm of you put it in your factory, or you put it in your home, wherever the case may be, and there is no meter? It's a one-time purchase. You buy it, it works. Does this have the availability to go into that area that we've never been before? Because I don't know about you, but I pay a monthly energy bill.
Oh, yes, it does. I expect it to be quite similar to the internet, where it was very expensive. Only universities have it, and now the internet is almost free. We're talking here, and things are published and transmitted in large databases, so the cost will slowly go down. The biggest secret about the atomic bomb was that it was possible. And when Rossi comes out and demonstrates this, and the world knows it's possible, there's going to be a lot of research and a lot of other avenues. I believe it's actually possible to produce, instead of thermal energy, produce electrical energy directly from these devices.
Right. So if that's the case, and you could put a loop on it where it powers itself, that gets rid of the meter. Meter gone.
Yeah, meter gone. It changes the entire structure of our society. That's the Achilles heel of our industrial society. We have a living standard that we enjoy today because energy does a lot of the work. And the Western civilization has been based on applying more and more energy to automate and make things better. And we've developed many things, amazing things in the field of electronics, controls. Watson was on TV, it's a computer that's miraculous, but we haven't done much in energy. I was at a decommissioning of a power plant. I start power plants up. In 1925, I recognized all the parts in the old power plant. It hasn't changed much. We're still burning stuff. But this technology could produce a revolution where energy's too cheap to measure, and that'll lift everybody up. And I'm looking for a very good time for humanity for the next 20 to 50 years.
Now, we know that there could be a possible problem with that, in the effect that if there's meter gone concept, if that does, say 5 years, 10 years, 15, whatever the case may be, once we get to that point, the people who make money in the oil industry and the fossil fuel industry and stuff like that, I suppose they can go into other areas to make money, like production of units, maintenance of units. But if there's no meter, they're not making a monthly stipend, as it were. So they would have to go into another area. You would think that they would be highly opposed to this, at least until they can get around it so that they're making money off this technology.
I don't think they're opposed to it. They just don't believe it. We'll find out if they're opposed to it when it starts making commercial headway.
Right.
And I expect that to happen by the end of the year. Right now, nobody believes it. There's been a lot said that the oil-producing countries will be opposed to it, but I doubt it. A lot of the main oil fields that are producing oil, like Ghawar in Saudi Arabia, are 50 years old, and they're using increasingly better technologies to extract the oil. But sooner or later, we're going to reach a peak. We want to conserve the oil that we have left for making plastics and other things. We don't want to burn it. So I think they'll be very glad that the last drop of oil won't be burned up, and they'll have a sustainable future in these countries.
Right. That's what we can hope. We can hope that they're not thinking with their pocketbook, and they'll just move into these other new areas of energy. So that'll be good.